Hello friends and welcome back to the Rare Moon Oracle. I'm Rayo and today we're going over the Justice card in our Tarot Discovery series, card number 11. The 12th video we've done? I think we're somewhere in there. We're moving right along. So we're going to go over our keywords, we're going to go over the original Rider Waite imagery, some other meanings. I pulled 4 cards for us today from my various tarot decks. Then we'll get into our reversals after that and see what else we got for us today. So for our Justice card, our keywords are going to be karma, truth, justice, obviously, big keyword for that card, fairness, equality, balance, measured, like measured, choices, measured, being measured in general, right? We've got trust, decisions, integrity. I wrote balance twice apparently as I'm going through, but we got order, responsibility, accountability, and the law kind of comes into that as well. So society, structure, law for the Justice card. It's card number 11, so that's a pretty big power number, adding up numerology wise into the number 2. So again, you get that balance there. The number 11 is also a karma number to me, because whenever I see 11s pop up as like a spiritual or power number, it's usually signifying the path you're on and whether or not the path is like the right one. So that karma kind of playing in for me with card number 11 and the number 11. Zodiac wise, the Justice card is tied to Libra. Again, that balance, those scales, right? Libra is controlled by the planet Venus, so you get that like bigger spiritual kind of like energy. Again, Venus is tied to like love and beauty, but Libra in this case, that balance of life and choosing the right thing at the right time. And then also with it, Libra is an air element for the zodiac, in the zodiac, and then so that'll tie into our like thinking and emotions, making that right decision, balancing again, right? So that communication of those aspects. Pretty common imagery in this card is going to be the scales and the sword. So again, the scales showing that measurement, that balancing, being measured, right? So I think it's an old Egyptian story for your heart being placed on one scale against everything else in your life, right? And seeing how it balances out, how it measures. And then that sword, that justice being dispensed, being taken into the hands, right? So that sword is usually a double-edged sword, and so that way it can swing either way at any time. So it's like, okay, if you did the right thing, it's going to go in your favor. If you did the wrong thing, it's not going to go in your favor. So we see that with the original Rider Waite imagery for sure. We see Justice standing there with the sword in one hand and the scales in the other. The Justice figure is wearing a crown to kind of show that higher knowledge and divinity, that divine will, that divine rule coming in. So a lot of power in this card again. For Justice just exists. It does not is it in your favor or against you. It's just depending on your actions for what happens. But let's see if there's anything else for our original Rider Waite imagery real quick here. Also with our Justice card, so it's very reminiscent of the Empress energy, because the Justice figure is sitting in between those 2 pillars with that curtain in between. So kind of a callback into that Empress energy, that intuition, knowledge, wisdom coming back through in the card here. So some other meanings we have for our Justice card here. So we have the past, present, and future all kind of balancing, right? So with the scales, the past is on one side, the future's on the other side, and the person in the middle holding those is that present, that current reality. So we get that like balance for everything coming through. Again, that karma is coming through. So with the Justice card, we have debts being repaid. For whether those are positive or negative is always up to the energy and for how you have been handling yourself. So that's wrongs being righted. The choices come in very, very heavy with this card for the Justice card. So we've got that right and wrong, impartiality by the Justice figure itself. Again, if it's you did right, then you're going to be treated correctly. If you did wrong, then you're going to be also treated correctly, but in that more negative repercussions way, right? So again, we come into those accepting the consequences. This is why it's tied into legality and the laws and the court system. So we hope to see fair outcomes coming with this card, people getting their just desserts, and again, for whatever way that pans out, right? You always have consequences to actions. It's just going to be for how you handled it, for whether they're positive or negative consequences. There's always consequences though. So it comes as a warning card a lot of the time too, because it's that reminder. It's like, hey, the actions you are taking, you have to see how it's going to pan out because of the actions you're taking and whether or not there's going to be long-term repercussions from it, right? So that's another keyword meaning for those cards, is those long-term repercussions. And again, with that double-edged sword, you get that cause and effect coming in. So with this card, it's going to heavily depend on the actions that you've taken, the actions that have already happened in regards to how that you're reading this card when it shows up, depending on the situation, right? So let us get into the cards I pulled for us today from our various tarot decks. We'll just kind of shuffle them here real quick because I feel like I tend to pull them all in the same order. Oh, and I didn't know if you guys noticed, hopefully you did, my new background here. I received it for Christmas, so it's very exciting because it helps change up the room and the structure a little bit for these videos. But top card right here, I'm not surprised, is our Santa Muerte Justice card. She's scary. She's a scary one, right? She's the one where it's like you just take a step a toe out of line and she's gonna catch you. Justice is gonna be dispensed very rapidly by this justice figure, it seems like. Those scales are quite large too, so you'll generally see the scales tend to feel a little bit smaller in some of the other tarot cards I've seen. In the original Rider Waite imagery, these are really long scales, right? So that weight is there for how heavy they might be. That gives a little bit more oomph to the justice being dispensed. There's a lot more like power and intensity, I think, with those scales being so big, and showing the amount of responsibility that comes with it, right? So the amount of effort it takes to hold this that high up, I think it's a very interesting thing to take note of for this justice card. The sword in this case for this justice card is going to be that scythe instead, very common amongst the Santa Muerte imagery for sure, but it also gives a little bit, I think, more intensity and power to this justice figure, because it feels, that's kind of scary. Look how big it is, right? So you'll see the size will vary across the different justice cards that we have, even in the original Rider Waite. It's a pretty big sword that the original Rider Waite justice figure is holding, but this scythe feels a little bit more intimidating. So this is not a justice card I'd want to see come out in the reverse in a reading, because this one feels pretty scary. So the consequences, the actions would feel pretty intense for this one to come out, is that feeling I get. All those skulls in the back, so with the skulls it kind of seems like maybe this justice took off their heads. And those are all the skulls in the back, right? Showing the others who have fallen to the consequences of their actions from the Justice card. So, very scary figure overall, but something to note for the scales, right? On the one side, on that far right side, we see all those butterflies again coming in. So sitting on that side of the scale to kind of offer a little bit more serenity and balance back into this card and take the little bit of an edge off. There's still a lot of intensity for this one, but that takes a little bit of an edge off with the butterflies and the roses kind of surrounding the skulls. Very Day of the Dead imagery for sure, and then the flowers kind of at the bottom. Let's see, anything else here? We got, looks like the Alpha and Omega imagery, the symbols on the necklace that the Justice figure is wearing. And I really like the way the Justice figure is holding the scythe kind of across the shoulders, right? So giving more, again, showing the weight of that responsibility of upholding justice, right? For how big these scales are and how big the scythe is and how this Justice figure has to hold these implements in order to dispense justice. A lot of power in this one. Let's move on to our next one though. So next top one I have right here is from the Seers Tarot. So this Justice, I like the mirroring in this one. So this one we see the top figure, maybe the positive one. In this case, more gentle feeling, the eyes closed, kind of a serene smile. And then on the other side, right, that one, she seems a little scarier. Her eyes almost look black, and kind of reminds me of like demon-esque, right? If anybody's seen Supernatural, it kind of gives me that vibe a little bit with the black eyes and that Justice going either way, right? Justice taking you to your consequences either way, whether that's positive or negative, coming through. Our scales, right, our cups are balanced on that sword, so that implementation of justice, right, the katana that this Justice figure is holding, and then the cups, the scale being balanced on that sword, and then you see the little minute differences in the cups right there for this Justice card. So the dots on the one cup, on the right cup, are black little dots along the rim right there, and then there's white little dots along the rim of the other one. So that is interesting to note. The hair is different on the Justice figure too. So the reverse images, one has more brown hair, the other has more black hair. Scenery wise, a little different, right? So kind of that black, gray, stormy sky on the reverse side, and that like blue, clear sky on the positive, upright side. Let's see, anything else here? It's a very interesting Justice figure too. So what I think is interesting for the two that we've had right here, so very powerful female figures for sure coming out, but also that there's a lot of intensity there. There's a lot, they're a little bit scary, right? They're a little bit intimidating. And I think that's a good indicator, a good imagery to have in a Justice card. The original Rider Waite doesn't have that kind of intensity, right? It doesn't feel like that Justice figure is going to take off your head in one swoop with the sword, right? Versus these two, our Santa Muerte and our Light Seers Tarot Justices. Yeah, they'll do it. You step the wrong way, you step out of line, they'll do it. So that's kind of interesting to note. Next one that we have though is going to be our Halloween tarot one. I threw this one in just for fun. It's a little bit more lighthearted, as is normal for the Halloween tarot. I like some of the imagery there. So we get our scales again. We've got like a little rat on the one side, and what looks like some little gourds or like potatoes or something on the other that have eyes. So that's interesting. We've got an owl kind of showing that wisdom coming in. We've got the some of the different suits coming in because we have those bats, and the bats are representative of I think the swords in this tarot deck. What I think is interesting, what I liked when I was looking deeper at this card for Justice, was the little figure in that bottom left hand corner, right? We've got a little doll with a little needle stabbed through the heart. So it's very, very minor, right? But we see that kind of like sword cutting imagery coming back out with our little voodoo doll type figure in the bottom left hand corner here, right? So I think that's very interesting how it's there, but it's very subtle, and you have to kind of look for it, right? Versus the scales and the figure of Justice, this pumpkin figure, being very, very in the forefront here. But let's see here. This Justice figure, by comparison, feels a little, it feels like more of a masculine energy and feels a little like crazy, if that makes sense. You'll have to give me your interpretation of the card when you see it here, but it's that this Justice figure feels like I'm gonna say he because it just feels like a masculine energy to me. Kind of feels like he's gonna go off the deep end, where it feels kind of like Joker energy a little bit. So I don't know if I'm getting that just because of the Halloween tear and the pumpkin, but that's the way the hands are kind of moving. The way the hands are depicted is kind of also what's giving me that feeling a little bit. But A little bit different there. I think that's a fun, different interpretation for the Justice card. So our last Justice figure comes from the Tarot of the Divine, a new one I just got in my collection here. So what I like for this one and what I like for the Tarot of the Divine is that all the cards are tied into different myths, legends, and folklore across the whole globe. So it gives a lot more depth and imagery and story than you normally see. Like, of course, the tarot itself is very, very strong with its symbols, right? And has a lot of meaning now because it's been used for so many decades, right? But when you tie it into these stories from all across the world, it adds a whole nother layer. And I think that's really, really cool. So our Justice figure coming from this tarot deck is from Korea. It's a Korean legend called the Amhang Osa. I'm studying Korean, but my pronunciation still needs some work for sure. But I had to look this one up because, and I think that's part of the cool part for this tarot deck itself is that learning process, right? Because I don't know all these different fairy tales and legends and myths. But when I looked this up, where this one comes from is this figure. Justice figure would be kind of like a secret service member of the emperor in Korea. So they would be called and be assigned to go to a different area to see how the government, like whatever government was in place, was functioning and how it was working, and acting kind of as the eyes of the emperor. So they would come in and be that secret service person. Let's see what the right word is for that. So Wikipedia calls them the secret royal inspector. So they'd be coming in and seeing how the government was functioning in that area. It helps to keep down corruption in these different villages throughout the whole country of Korea. And once these secret royal inspectors, they would be in kind of hiding or whatever. They'd come up, like be like a beggar or something, sometimes because they didn't have money because they had to support themselves, but they'd come in like a certain role into the society, into this little like village or town or whatever that they were looking into for the emperor, and play off as a person just coming in and kind of see how everything was going. And then eventually they revealed themselves to the government, and then they would help make the decisions and choices and switch out the people if they were finding corruption or things. They were kind of the hand of the emperor in that area. If there's anybody who knows more than me, please feel free to add it to the comment section down below. Give us a little bit of a lesson. That'd be wonderful to hear about. But yeah, this person would dispense justice through the emperor's will in these different villages and different areas. So I think that's really cool for seeing how this legend ties in to the mythos of the Justice card. Quite different, and we see for our little Justice figure here, right? So we got that sword imagery again, and then they're holding up what I'm guessing is going to be the seal of the emperor in this case, showing their status as that royal inspector, that they are doing this as for the will of the emperor, right? And then once they finish their mission, they go and report to the emperor and finish out, and that's how they kept kind of some of the corruption down in the world and in the country, and offered justice, right? So very, very cool, different card there. But that's all we've got for the 4 different tarot decks I've pulled for us today. So let us get into our reversals now. The reversals for Justice, similar to the Wheel of Fortune, don't have the same like too much or not enough of the card. It's very much based on the actions that the card is referring to, right? So if we are in the reverse for the Justice card, we can feel out of balance because our life is out of balance, so those scales being off, right? We're getting those negative consequences of our actions, right? So the consequences of actions come either way, whether or not the Justice card is upright or in the reverse, but it's going to be dependent on what actions took place for what consequences there are, right? So you're paying your debts. This card also talks about bias, dishonesty, injustice when it's coming out in the reverse. So, of course, justice, injustice, right? So we're not taking our responsibility seriously, or we're not taking responsibility for our actions. We can get that corruption, mistreatment. So questions like you want to ask yourself when the justice comes up in reverse, it's like, did I misstep? What did I do wrong? What mistake did I make that is coming due that I have consequences for my action for, right? What were those actions? So, because then that gives you the opportunity to not have justice take off your head if you're owning up to your mistakes, right? So that's part another of the reversal meanings is like, hey, own up to your mistakes. Try not to be dishonest with yourself. But then kind of like in a little bit of a positive note for coming reverse is like, hey, maybe don't judge yourself too harshly, right? You're judging yourself really, really harshly in life, and you need to kind of look at that positive, right? Justice isn't treating you as harshly as you're treating yourself, right? But then either way, the justice coming out in reverse, if there's going to be some injustice there, something that is unjust in your life, again, one of those like court cases, maybe some type of law thing, but there's also going to be retribution, again, those consequences for actions coming up. There's always going to be retribution with the justice card. So not like a positive or negative for this card, really, right? It's going to be very dependent on the reading, for whether it's showing up in the positive or the reverse, and also based on like how those what actions have taken place, right? What consequences are you receiving now? What karma are you getting because of the actions that have been taken? So if you have been working justly and fairly and with kindness and courtesy, then justice coming out is probably going to always be a good sign for you, right? You're getting your just desserts in a positive way, right? Karma is looking favorably upon you. However, if you're acting dishonestly, you're being cruel, there's corruption, you're being mean, justice is coming for you. Still, it shows up, and then you'll get the less pleasant you'll get the less pleasant events that come from that, right? Everybody gets their just desserts. Karma always comes around, right? And that was kind of reflected in the Wheel of Fortune. So this is just more of that energy coming through for the wheel constantly turning, right? Sometimes you just have to ride out the wheel, but in this case for justice, it's very dependent on the actions you've already taken and receiving the consequences of whatever those actions were, positive or negative. So very different, interesting card. But that is all I have for us today. I hope you've enjoyed the video. Please like, comment, and subscribe down below. And I will see you in the next one. Have a good day. Bye.